Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're strapping in for something that is completely unlike anything we've covered before.
Yeah, that is definitely an understatement.
Right. I mean, usually we're looking at business trends or historical events through a pretty standard lens. But today we are looking at this wild collision of two worlds that you probably never thought would meet. We're talking about the plastic gray nostalgia of 8-bit gaming colliding head-on with the modern crisis of masculinity.
It's a very unique synthesis. We're diving into a text that takes the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Atari 2600 and basically uses them as a decoder ring for, well, modern gender politics, the legal system, and our whole cultural landscape.
That sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But before we hit the start button on this one, I have to remind you, if you are enjoying these deep dives, please make sure to like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us get this content out to more learners like you. Okay, so the source material we are unpacking today is an ebook. It's titled 8-Bit Video Game Consoles, NES, Master System, Atari, and More by Conrad Reicher. Now, just looking at that title, you probably assume it's a collector's guide, right, with pixel counts and release dates.
Right, you'd expect a standard coffee table book. But Riker is doing something much more ambitious here, and frankly, much more controversial. He is presenting a full-blown cultural manifesto.
Yeah, this isn't just about Mario jumping on Goombas.
No, not at all. His core argument is that 8-bit gaming was essentially the last bastion of true, unadulterated masculinity. He calls it a meritocracy that existed before our modern institutions, gaming included, were, in his view, captured by feminists and Marxists.
And that is the hook right there. This is an ultra-long, highly incisive, and honestly fascinating review of the way culture has shifted.
Definitely.
He uses the hardware, the software, and the whole culture of the 1980s as a lens to critique where we are today. He writes specifically for an audience interested in men's rights, the red pill perspective, and the manosphere.
Exactly. It's a dense text. He argues that we have fundamentally shifted away from biological reality. And just to be completely clear for you listening right now, our mission here is strictly to unpack Riker's arguments exactly as he presents them in the text.
Right. We're not taking sides.
We are not taking sides. Whether it touches on left-wing or right-wing politics, we are impartially reporting the content so you can understand the ideas contained in the source material without us endorsing them either way.
Spot on. We just want to give you the overview of this fascinating cultural argument. So if you are interested in men's rights or understanding the history of our institutions before they were altered, this is basically required reading.
It's a heavy hitter.
It is. And just so you know, right up front, if this sounds intriguing to you, you should check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy the book. And you can follow the author at Conrad M. Reicher at Substack. That's Conrad, the letter N, Reicher at Substack. But let's dive into the first big concept, the reset button.
This is where he starts, with what he calls the masculine genesis of gaming. He draws this sharp philosophical contrast between the 8-bit era and today. Think about those old games. Contra, Ninja Gaiden, Battletoads. What was their defining feature?
Brutality. Absolute brutality. Yeah. I remember playing Contra. You ran out of lives, and that was just it.
Right.
No checkpoints. You were back to the start screen.
Precisely. And Riker argues that this wasn't just a technical limitation of the hardware, it was a moral framework. He calls these games training camps for real life. They were pure meritocratic systems. You either had the skill to survive, or you failed.
There was no hand-holding.
None. No participation trophies, no rewind features, no dynamic difficulty adjustment to make you feel better.
And he connects this to a really specific narrative in the book, The Story of John from London. Can you walk us through that? Because that seemed like the moment the book really pivoted from gaming history to serious social commentary.
Yeah, it's a very pivotal anecdote. John is described as a high earner, a winner in the traditional sense. He had the career, the house, the status. But according to the text, he lost his house, his kids, and a huge amount of money due to false abuse claims in divorce court.
Wow.
So Riker uses John's story to illustrate this massive disconnect. In the old games, failure was a lesson. You learned the pattern. You got better. You overcame. The rules were static and fair.
But in modern society?
In modern society, specifically in family courts, as Riker portrays them, the failure state is rigged. You can do everything right, play by the rules, maximize your score, and still get a game over because the system itself is biased against you.
Which leads right into that idea of the double bind he talks about. These are the traits required to beat those brutally hard games. The relentless focus, the aggression, the resilience, that obsessive drive to master a system, those are the exact same traits men use to build civilization.
Yes.
But Riker argues those traits are now under attack.
Right. He argues that society demonizes these exact traits as toxic masculinity right up until the moment they are necessary for survival.
Like the firefighter example.
Exactly. He brings up the firefighters on 9/11, 97% male, charging into danger. That masculine aggression and drive to conquer fear saved lives. But Riker points out that in a modern corporate HR setting, that same drive is often penalized or viewed as a threat.
He has that great line about the Atari 2600. He calls it a heat sink hero.
Yes, the heat sink hero. The argument is that the machine didn't coddle you, it demanded mastery. It just sat there hot and uncompromising, and he believes we have lost that demand for excellence in favor of equity.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, if a game is too hard today, developers patch it to make it easier. If life is too hard, Riker argues, society lowers the standard to ensure equal outcomes rather than equal opportunity.
And that philosophy of biological reality doesn't just stop at the software either. This was the part that really surprised me, the controller conquest. I never thought I'd be reading a biological analysis of a joystick.
It sounds funny at first, but Riker leans heavily on biological essentialism here. He cites research, including studies by evolutionary psychologists like David Buss and data from UCLA, arguing that men are biologically hardwired for system mastery, spatial reasoning, and competition.
Okay, so how does he translate that to a piece of plastic?
He looks at the physical design of the NES controller and the Atari joysticks. Riker asserts that those controllers were physically engineered for male hands and male grip strength. He actually references U.S. Army anthropometric data.
Oh, way!
Yes, regarding hand size. And he brings up internal memos from Sega about thumb calluses.
Thumb calluses. That is a deep cut.
It is. The idea is that the stiffness of the buttons and the size of the inputs were designed for a specific biological reality, a male one. You needed a certain amount of physical force and endurance just to operate the machine effectively. It wasn't designed to be comfortable.
It was designed to be effective. Which brings us to his critique of modern controllers. He's pretty biting about the new ergonomic designs.
He calls it the estrogen errors concept. He posits that modern controllers are smaller, softer, and more ergonomic as a concession to inclusivity.
And he thinks that's a problem.
He views it as ignoring biology. By trying to make gaming accessible to everyone by introducing what he terms feminine values like comfort, safety, and narrative over gameplay, he argues the industry has essentially bricked itself.
Bricked the motherboard, I think was his phrase. And he backs this up with data on reaction times, right? He's not just saying men are faster based on a hunch.
No, he cites Harvard studies and other data suggesting a significant difference in reaction times between males and females, claiming men are around 15 to 20% faster in certain visual spatial tasks.
And how does that tie into the modern gaming scene?
He connects this directly to esports. He argues that male dominance in competitive gaming leaderboards isn't about oppression or gatekeeping or a hostile culture.
He thinks it's just pure biology.
Exactly. He calls it the merit matrix of biology in action. In his view, the scoreboard doesn't lie, and the scoreboard reflects those innate differences. To try and engineer that away is to fight against nature itself.
So you have this biological foundation, hands, brains, reaction times, and then he zooms out to what he calls the rigged game of society. This is where he really connects 8-bit gaming to the manosphere worldview. He spends a lot of time on dating and this concept of hypergamy. For the listener who might not know, how is he defining that?
Hypergamy is a term used to describe the idea that women naturally date up. They seek partners with higher status or resources. Riker compares the dating market to a high-score leaderboard.
Right, the Tinder stats.
Yes. He cites statistics claiming that women swipe right on only the top 4.5 to 10% of men on dating apps.
That is a brutal stat. If you are in the bottom 90%, that is harder than beating Battletoads.
It's the ultimate high-score chase. The argument is that women biologically want winners, men who have accumulated resources. But the paradox, or the glitch as Riker might call it, is that while women want the high score, society punishes men for having the competitive drive needed to get that score.
That's the double bind coming back around. Men are expected to be protectors. He notes that 93% of workplace deaths are men doing the dangerous jobs that keep infrastructure running. But if they act too masculine, they're labeled toxic.
And he is very critical of the legal system in this regard. He discusses the Duluth model used in domestic violence cases.
Can you explain that briefly?
Sure. The Duluth model is a framework that posits domestic violence is a result of patriarchal power and control. Riker argues that in practice, this leads police and courts to default to assuming the male is the aggressor in any conflict, regardless of evidence.
And he combines this with divorce stats.
Right. He points out that female-initiated divorce is around 70 to 80%.
And this is where he introduces the story of Mike.
Yes. Mike is another case study. He's presented as a guy who played by the rules, worked hard, paid his taxes, essentially paying the testosterone tax, as Riker calls it, and still got wiped out by the family court system.
And Riker contrasts this messy, rigged, real-world system with the Nintendo seal of quality. I love that comparison, the little gold badge on the box.
It's a very powerful metaphor. In the 8-bit era, that gold seal meant the game worked. It meant quality control was brutal, but fair. If a game was broken, it didn't ship.
Pure meritocracy.
Exactly. Riker argues that in the modern world, equality, which he links directly to DEI initiatives and quotas, has destroyed that seal of quality.
So he's saying we are prioritizing identity over competence.
Yes. And just like the video game crash of 1983, where the market was flooded with low-quality garbage because there were no standards, he believes society is heading toward a collapse in quality because we've stopped enforcing standards of excellence.
It's amazing how he keeps tying these huge social concepts back to the actual hardware. Which leads us to the war on nostalgia. This section was wild because he goes after emulators. I mean, I use them all the time for convenience. I didn't expect him to hate them so much.
He has a whole chapter called Emulator Emasculation. He views emulators as participation trophies.
Just because of the save states.
It's the removal of consequence. Save states, rewinds, cheats. He argues that using an emulator removes the risk and therefore removes the masculinity. He actually fetishizes the physical act of using the cartridge.
Like blowing into the slot.
Exactly. Blowing the dust out, the force required to jam it down, the distinct clunk of the power switch. He describes it as a masculine ritual of maintenance and force.
So you had to physically engage with the machine to make it work.
If you aren't struggling with the hardware, you aren't really playing. You are just simulating the experience without the discipline. It's like watching a workout video instead of actually lifting the weights.
Joystick Jihad was the other chapter title that jumped out at me. He goes hard on modern game narratives here.
He critiques what he sees as the woke invasion of storytelling. He targets games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Mass Effect Andromeda. His argument is that characters like Lara Croft or Frank West have been updated to be less idealized and more realistic.
And he sees that as a bad thing.
He views it as a betrayal of the male fantasy that built the industry. In his view, men play these games to inhabit a power fantasy, an ideal. Deconstructing that hero defeats the purpose. Men don't want to play as a reflection of average reality, they want to play as the conqueror.
He mentions Battlefield V2 regarding historical accuracy.
Yes, the inclusion of female soldiers in World War II settings.
Oh, yeah.
Riker argues this is forced diversity that breaks historical immersion and ignores biological reality. He sees it as rewriting history to fit a modern political agenda.
And he even brings it down to the sound design. The sound chip salvation concept, his cultural take on it was just fascinating.
It's a very interesting technical point. He argues that 8-bit audio, the square waves, the pulse channels, represents order and hierarchy. It's clean, mathematical, structured. There is no ambiguity in a square wave. It is either on or off.
Right.
He contrasts this with modern ambient noise or complex emotional scores, which he associates with chaos and a lack of masculine structure.
It's incredibly consistent. Even the beep of a console is part of his philosophy. But he doesn't just complain. He offers a path forward in the fatherhood and legacy section.
The Fatherboard Bonds chapter. Riker suggests a return to what he calls pixel paternity.
Which means playing hard games with your kids.
Specifically, using high-difficulty games like Contra or Mega Man as teaching tools for sons. He argues against emotional hand-holding. If the kid loses, he loses. He has to get better.
It teaches them resilience.
Riker believes this teaches boys that the world doesn't care about their feelings, only their competence.
He calls it the Konami code for life.
Right. Stoicism, resource acquisition, and ignoring the critics. He is telling red-pilled men to essentially reset their own lives using the discipline taught by retro consoles. Reject the softness of modern culture and build your own pockets of meritocracy.
It is a provocative take, framing the NES not as a toy, but as a lost scripture. So let's wrap this up. What is the big takeaway here for you, the listener?
Riker is arguing that 8-bit consoles were tools of masculine forging. They were strict, fair, and difficult. He believes the decline of these values explains many of the struggles men face today. We have replaced the game over screen with a participation ribbon.
And he wants us to bring the game over back.
He does. He leaves the reader with the thought that the game over screen isn't the end. It is a demand to get better, to try again, and to refuse to blame the system for your failure.
You know, that leaves me with a final thought to mull over. If Riker is right that 8-bit games trained men to build and maintain hard, unforgiving systems, what happens to the actual physical infrastructure of society? The power grids, the bridges, when the save state generation is fully in charge? Are we heading for a real-life crash? It's something to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into a manifesto that uses a plastic controller to decode the modern male experience. If you want to dive deeper into these arguments, you need to like and subscribe to the show so you don't miss our next deep dive.
And we really only scratch the surface of the data he presents.
Definitely. To get the full manifesto, you need to buy the ebook on Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books. It's called 8-Bit Video Game Consoles, NES, Master System, Atari, and More by Conrad Riker.
And for more updates, you can follow him at Conrad and Riker at Substack.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep grinding for that high score, and we'll see you next time.